Thank you very much for having me today. Thank you, Stefan, for all of your organization, and to Roxana as well for her very nice introduction. It's a great pleasure to be here with you today, online in my case. And also, I look forward to all the other presentation of all the guests because the agenda looks really great. As Roxana said, today we're two lawyers, and I'm the first one of them. On the other hand, I have the fun part of the lawyering stuff, which is starting my presentation with some aspects regarding the implementation of BIM at EU level. I will put my presentation on, and you let me know if everything goes well, okay? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
Before Georgiana enters into the substantial part of her presentation, we just want to let you know that you can ask questions in the chat, in the YouTube chat and Facebook chat, and we're going to address them with every speaker after they finish their presentation. So don't hesitate to address any questions that you might have.
Okay. So you see my presentation, everything looks good?
Yeah.
As you see from the title of my presentation, and as I was mentioning before, I will talk about some aspects that are, let's say, the fun part of BIM when it comes to legal aspects. And we're going to discuss information about the implementation of BIM at EU level. I'm going to touch briefly on public policies, regulation, and private initiatives. And we have prepared for you some case studies so that you can see how things have been implemented throughout Europe. My agenda for today will include 5 main points. After a brief introduction, I will discuss what is BIM and some benefits of BIM. Then a very important information that we need to consider, as also Roxana was mentioning, is the BIM diffusion strategies when it comes to the implementation of BIM in the EU. Following this, we will look together at an overview of the case of Europe and how things are at the European level. And finally, some case studies that we have selected, and we will include there some success stories and some very beautiful projects that have been developed or are being developed throughout Europe at this moment. Now, to pass on to the first topic, introduction. Overall, Europe has been one of the leaders in global BIM adoption. However, providing a simple answer to the question, what is the status of BIM adoption in Europe, is not such a straightforward answer, especially because countries are not following the same timeline or the same methods in their BIM adoption. While we have early adopters that are already reaping benefits from their established BIM programs, BIM implementation on the other frame, it's that remains in an exploratory phase in many other countries. However, the prediction is that BIM will become the standard for delivering the world's public infrastructure projects. Therefore, considering that BIM is becoming a global language for the infrastructure and construction sector, enabling a greater collaboration and movement of capabilities across borders, it's also very, very important. Now, I underline here in my presentation an extract from the EU BIM Task Group Handbook, which will be discussed further on by Roxana and the other speakers. But I'm going to just leave you with one of the conclusions before moving on. And it's a very important conclusion that underlines the fact that one-off pilot projects or successful mega infrastructure projects are, of course, extraordinary, as I will present in the last part of my presentation. and are very beneficial examples. However, the European prize or Europe's prize, which is valued at 130 billion in saving, will not be achieved through the widespread adoption of digital processes unless of widespread adoption of digital processes of mainstream construction projects. Therefore, of course, it's important to have these sort of mega structures built in BIM. They're great examples that are being set. However, we need more widespread adoption of BIM. Now, because I'm the first one talking and the first lawyer in this case, I wanted to briefly discuss with you a few aspects that again will be developed further on, which is what is actually BIM and what are the benefits of the BIM process. Now, here again, we have many definitions. There is no universally accepted definition when it comes to BIM. However, two important definitions that we might consider is, of course, the UK definition, considering their large history when it comes to BIM. And also, if we go back to the EU BIM Task Group Handbook, we can consider BIM as a digital form of construction and asset operations, which bring together technology, process improvements, and digital information to radically improve client and project outcomes and asset operation. Of course, reading this definition, I guess that all of us in the industry will just want to have more of BIM in our lives. But as to move on, even though this is a definition and even though we understand very well the benefits of BIM and this process that applies to all aspects of the construction of a building, from design, estimating, supply chain, delivery of goods during the building process, resource allocation, the productivity of requirements to meet large targets, and of course, very importantly, the post-handover phase. So we understand what BIM is, we understand very well all the benefits. Now, what has been done, or what are the strategies that are being used in order to implement BIM? Now, all of us that have been working with BIM or know more about BIM know that when it comes to BIM diffusion strategies, there are two main words that come to our mind, which is the top-down strategy or bottom-up. Top-down, to briefly mention it, it's a push by an authority to mandate the adoption of a specific solution. And bottom-up, adoption of technology, processes, and policies from the bottom up without a mandate from an authority. Now, in the specialized literature, you can also discuss, or you can also see a middle-out diffusion pattern, which is everything that is in between bottom-up and top-down. Now, there is a lot of debate which one of the two strategies, the two main strategies, top down or bottom up, are the most beneficial when it comes to implementing BIM. Evidence that the top down dynamic encourages a faster adoption rates across either an organization or at the macro level exists. However, the question is if this diffusion strategy leads to a sustained infusion in BIM workflows and deliverables. And this is an important question that it could be very useful to assess, especially when it comes to countries that have not been implemented BIM at all or have implemented BIM at an earlier stage. As we will see in our examples, in most of the cases, a joint force from the top down and bottom up have been proving extremely beneficial when it comes to the implementation of BIM. So current drivers for BIM include both public and private sector actors, as well as independent industry organizations. Of course, the private sector has a lot of financial incentives when it comes to transitioning to BIM, especially because the estimated value for the European BIM market was, when it comes to benefits, was at 1.8 billion euro in 2016, and a growth up to 2.1 billion euro was expected by 2023. Besides the financial incentives, which of course in the private sector are extremely important, we also consider other benefits such as improved efficiency, reduced waste, and of course, an extremely important, better project management, which in the case of Romania should be a must, especially. Now, when it comes to public sector actors, of course that the financial pressure or the financial incentive is not equal. Nonetheless, um, the BIM implementation from the public sector has also it's also responding to a pressure for a more efficient public spending, more sustainable development of the shared public spaces, improved management of public buildings, and even more so, there will always be a government interest in advancing BIM and digitalization in such a major industry as the construction one, which in turn would benefit the overall economic growth. As we all know, the construction sector is an important sector when it comes to economic growth, and it's one of the sectors that it's suffering, where the economy has a lot of problems. Of course, that if we would implement and we would sustain this industry with technologies that would automatically be more beneficial and prove that would have a financial benefit, would at the end of the day be extremely important for the overall growth of the economy. We talked about the private sector, which is so obvious. We talked about the public sector and the importance of a diffusion strategy encouraged by the public sector. And finally, the industry organizations, such as the one where we are presenting today and that did such a great job in organizing this event. We have seen in the experience of other countries and in the overall implementation of BIM across Europe that industry organizations play a very important role in helping bringing together governments and business interests in BIM. Especially because the organization often includes participants from both the public and the private sectors, and are generally well equipped to their people and the resources that they develop to represent and facilitate this convergence of interest. Now, that was briefly what I wanted to comment when it comes to a very small definition of BIM, and also the diffusion strategies that we have sum up in two words, top down and bottom up. So let's go to the case of hand, which is the case of Europe. What is going on in Europe and how things have been done when it comes to the implementation of BIM at the European level. Now, in my presentation, I'm not touching the implementation of BIM worldwide, even though I encourage you to read more about the success stories. You can learn a lot about what is being doing in some other countries. Now, one of the first ones that comes to my mind that I find fascinating is Singapore. But you can also look at Australia, the United States, and other very developed countries when it comes to BIM. Now, Europe. Here you can see a very interesting image which tackles milestones in the adoption of BIM. The history begins, at least from the perspective of this graph, from 1992 with AutoCAD introduction, integrated CAD-based calculation, Revit, and so on. Here we have Finland, which will be discussed further on by one of the speakers, who has been a landmark, who has set a landmark, or it's a landmark when it comes to BIM adoption. Efforts from the EU procurement directives for the support of BIM, and evolutions that include Norway and other countries up to the current moment. Following this, I have here another graph for you, which is a photo of Europe showing the adoption of BIM across Europe. Now, the most recent graph that I found in the research is from 2017. Of course, that from 2017 up till now, the graph has been evolving. However, what stands out in this graph, and I would like to underline, is still applicable today, and we can see different patterns of BIM adoption in Europe. You can see the differences that stand out, which are from the northern part of Europe, who are countries that are implementing BIM as a day-to-day business, I would dare to say. And of course, at the other end of the spectrum, we have the Eastern Bloc, including Romania. In between, now, the in-between includes already a number of countries that have been developing a lot of strategies of BIM and have been implementing BIM at a higher speed. And here are some of the examples that I'm going to discuss later on. We see Spain, Italy, France, Germany, etc. So to sum up, when it comes to BIM adoption in the EU, we have open BIM standards and mandates. We have BIM mandates for public construction. We have active BIM programs and strategies that set goals for the future. Or the saddest of them all, no BIM mandate that is being planned. Now, this is the overview. We have some countries that are early adopters, such as Finland, the Netherlands, or Denmark, and other countries that do not have any specification on the use of BIM processes, such as Romania. If we're talking about the division in between the implementation of EU BIM in Europe, we can summarize it in certain groups of countries according to the current stages of their BIM adoption. At the forefront, we have Austria and Norway, which are one of the first countries to establish the open BIM standards, requiring as much as level 3 BIM on public project. Other countries, including the Nordic countries, UK, France, Italy, level 2 BIM, with various schedules set for moving up to level 3. Countries including Germany have made huge advancement in introducing BIM with a view towards the BIM mandate, which is actually happening full on this year, and countries that have no BIM planification. However, here is where I underline a very important aspect, which is, even though at the European level, we do not have countries that have a BIM mandate planned or implemented or even not planned, that is not necessarily an indication of the lack of interest of BIM in these countries, and we have active BIM organizations and many initiatives to take the BIM processes forward and their implementation. And I guess our work today could also be included in these initiatives or interest that we have in BIM and the adoption of BIM or putting BIM forward. Here I sum up some of the strategies that have been used in other countries across Europe. I'm only going to make brief mentions on some of them because you will be in very, very good hands following my presentation. When it comes to Finland, Finland, of course, it's an example in the digital construction industry. No official national strategies has been implemented. However, the development of BIM in Finland has been really great, and I'm very happy to hear the next presentation on the case of Finland. I'm sure we can all learn so much from their experience. Denmark, again, one of the most developed countries in the world when it comes to BIM and digitalization in construction. And it was one of the first countries to ever mandate BIM back in 2007. Again, we'll have a great presentation on Denmark as well. I'll mention Norway because Norway is a case that is very, very developed with guidelines starting from 2009. And one of their success stories, it's the first paperless project for a mega infrastructure project of 42 billion euros. Now, leading the pack of Europe, or not anymore in Europe, I guess, it's the UK. Now, Roxana will discuss more about the UK as well. And I'll leave you in very good hands when it comes to the UK, especially considering Roxana's experience at the King's College, where she's with an institution with which she is collaborating. So as I was saying, I just wanted to briefly mention Finland, Denmark, the UK, countries who will be later on discussed as well. I added Norway in order to consider it on the map of BIM in Europe. France has also had a very interesting BIM strategy, which was supported by two ministries. And they launch it, especially when it comes to big infrastructure projects back in 2015. And they had a plan in order for the digital transformation of the building processes and construction. France is an example when it comes to developing the largest infrastructure projects in Europe, such as the Grand Paris Express, which is a 200-kilometer long high-speed metropolitan railway project with 68 new metro stations. I guess all of us who are living in Bucharest are looking forward for such a project in the near future. If not 68 stations, at least 20 would also be enough. And that brings me to mentioning Romania. Very briefly, Romania, of course, that is a work in progress. A push in Romania for the use of BIM is being made, especially from bottom up. A lot is needed to be done at the top level as well in order for authorities to get more information on when it comes to BIM. And I'm very happy to also acknowledge the speakers that are going to discuss the situation of BIM and their experience with BIM, both in the private sector and also when it comes to BIM in the public sector in Romania as well. What I can say from the legal perspective is that we have a lot of work to be done, and I hope there will be more and more of it. However, I'm extremely happy to notice, at least in our practice in public procurement, in our law office, to see that in recent tenders, they're already considering the inclusion of certain requirements that we might consider as getting close to a BIM, that might be a BIM requirement. And this is happening for very important infrastructure projects in Romania. So we're very happy to learn that the Romanian authorities are setting first steps towards a BIM implementation that will probably happen in the future. And of course, we are here today, which is a big step forward as well. Now, I'll move on to the last part of my presentation, which is the selected EU countries. I have selected for you a few cases which also underline different adoption strategies in Europe, and cases that are success stories, but also cases which we might consider again a work in progress with different strategies that have been implemented. The first one that I'm going to start with is Sweden. In Sweden, we have a very strong public-private collaboration. There is no national strategy on BIM, but different departments of the government have BIM strategies. Among them, it is worth mentioning the Swedish Road Administration, which has a BIM strategy mandate from 2017. Now, if you read about BIM in Europe and BIM in Sweden, the Swedish Road Administration stands out in the crowd because back in 2014, when the BIM Alliance Sweden has formed, which were parties from all industry, technical consultants, constructors, software company, architects, BIM material suppliers, also important stakeholders in the real estate and facility management came together. And to this BIM alliance, the Swedish Transport Administration joined in order to open a dialogue with the industry about the public administration for its BIM programs. Now, here I have also put in the next slide a very beautiful project that has been implemented in BIM. It's one of the world's largest public-private partnership with a huge investment. Skanska was the one that developed it, that used advanced BIM modeling across the entire life cycle of the building. And of course, all the engineers and architects are probably very well knowledgeable about this project, and also how BIM was used to create from the very beginning a successful story when it comes to the implementation of this hospital in Sweden. I have also included here a public project, which is or let's say a more important infrastructure project, which is the E4 Stockholm bypass, which is a work in progress, and it's extremely interesting to see its evolution. It's an extensive project in order to bypass the center of Stockholm and its traffic, and it's at the end of it is going to be one of the longest road tunnels in the world. Again, a great work in BIM and the implementation of BIM in the EU. Now, we have seen Sweden and the model that they have used. Germany, it's another interesting model with a strategy, with the bottom-up strategy, where association and clusters also have pushed for a national strategy, which has been developed also back in 2015, with a lot of support from the Ministry of Infrastructure and Digital Construction in Germany. They have built a roadmap, which was also financed by the said ministry. They have also used the technique which through the implementation of pilot projects in order to test the benefits of the BIM environment until 2020. And very importantly, the ministry has collaborated in this project with economic support, of course, in the order of millions of euros. In the public building, BIM has been approved through a regulation back in January 2017 for investment of over 5 million, and interestingly, from 2020 in December, so in a couple of months, all government infrastructure should be carried out with BIM. So Germany is also a very interesting setup for BIM. Even though Germany has developed everything related to BIM at a later stage than other countries, such as the Nordic countries, however, they have taken steps for the implementation of BIM that have been very quickly implemented. When it comes to Germany, also everything related to legal BIM is extremely developed as well, and all of you interested in the subject can also find a lot of information from the German experience on BIM. Now, here I have introduced a beautiful building that you might enjoy in your next trip to Berlin, which is Futurist Berlin. It's a reference project in BIM. It's one of the projects that was promoted by public-private partnerships. Moving on, we have seen Sweden and Germany. Sweden at a very evolved pace, Germany with a huge amount of work that has been performed until now. Italy, it's also a country that stands out when it comes to a progressive evolution towards BIM implemented by Decreto Legge 560 per 2017. Those of you who are familiarized with it know that there were certain phases that were introduced by this decree. Starting from 2019, the use of BIM was mandatory for all work contracts over 100 million euros. From 2019 to 2021, criteria were introduced related to more complexity issues regarding the project and not only the amount. And for strategic works, from 2022, BIM would be mandatory for all ordinary works with some exceptions. And by 2025, it is considered to be implemented for all projects, regardless of their complexity, which includes works that have even a value of lower than 1 million euros, which is of course a different type of strategy. When it comes to Italy, an open project, a very beautiful open project, with two buildings that are meant to connect innovation and tradition, the new Bulgari manufacturing facility that you can see here as well. And I'll move on to Spain. Spain has also been reaching the BIM world a bit later. This BIM national strategy was developed from 2015. It was sponsored also with a lot of support from the Ministry of Civil Works. It was an effort that engaged both companies and professionals from different areas of the industry. And the strategy included targets from 2018 with BIM applicable in public buildings project. And from 2019 for infrastructure projects. Now, currently, this requirement of BIM for infrastructure projects applies for entities under the Ministry of Civil Works or Development, which includes the main big infrastructure authorities, port, airport, railways, etc. So there is a larger implementation of BIM that has been occurring in the last 1-2 years in Spain. Now Catalonia, which is a region in Spain, has also has a very interesting track. A BIM roadmap in Catalonia was initiated back in 2015 as well by the autonomous region, Comisión Futur Ovitec, and In Catalonia from 2019, BIM became obligatory for public works that have over a certain value, which is for public works, it's more than 5.5 million euros. And the same document establishes that from 2021, BIM will be required for more contracts. So in Catalonia, BIM, it's an everyday job for or for the majority of construction projects. And we have seen there that can be noticed a very high level of implementation and a lot of work both from public authorities and the preparation of public authorities, and also a lot of efforts that come from the private sector in order to prepare their people, and also to be prepared for everything that is requiring BIM. Now, when it comes to the legal part of it, the implementation of legal BIM, it's still an aspect that needs to be more developed. Some contracts include just a mention of BIM, some others are including protocols. So we see a lot of aspects that are a work in progress as well. Now, another very interesting regional example in Spain is the Basque Country. In 2016, they also developed a strategy led by a construction cluster. Now, interestingly enough, in the Basque Country, BIM is required for certain public companies, such as the ones that are responsible for social housing, urbanistic regeneration, urban rehabilitation, and so on, even though it's not regulated directly in the law. My colleague Roxana will also mention a very interesting court decision that established that BIM was correctly introduced in the tender documentation that comes exactly from this region of Spain. Now, a fun and very beautiful project, especially for football fans out there. It's the Espai Barça development at Camp Nou, which includes the football field and also the surrounding facility. It's a huge project as well that is being implemented in BIM, and a beautiful project. From Spain also we have another early example, which is the campus of the University of Barcelona. Other very, very interesting and large projects for one of the BBVA, which is one of the largest banks in Spain building that you can see in Madrid. Now, I will finalize after going through different models from Sweden, Germany, Italy, and Spain that have done a lot of efforts that included efforts from the organizations that are implicated in BIM, but also the governments. Now, Estonia, it's also a very interesting example that started back with a cluster of private companies again to develop BIM, where the Ministry of Economic Affairs later joined, practically after all of this effort, the industry gained a lot of confidence in order to invest in training, skill developments, and new workflows and technology. Of course, we can all learn, especially in the countries such as Romania, where a lot needs to be done when it comes to BIM. We can learn a lot from all of these examples. Of course, we can look at the Nordic countries, which are far ahead when it comes to BIM. And then we can look at countries that might be closer to us, or at least we feel closer to, such as France, Italy, and Spain, where in a few amount of time, huge advancements have been made when it comes to BIM implementation, and a huge amount of work has been performed together from the private sector, industry organization, and public authorities, which are, of course, extremely important. Now, this was my presentation for today. Now, if you have any questions, you can, I think at the end of the presentation, you can write those questions and I will make sure to answer them. I hope you found the information very useful. And now I will pass on to Ștefan and Roxana.
Thank you,
Thank
Georgiana,
you
for your
very
wonderful
much.
presentation. It was very informative, and I guess we can have a bigger picture of the evolution of BIM in the Europe countries. And as much as I can see right now, it's at our border. So BIM is basically invading our country. The question is how.
Nicely said, Ștefan.
The question is, how are we going to, I don't know, we don't want to defend the invasion, we want to open our gates. Do you think a public and a private partnership could be a solution, or do you think we should look for examples in the bottom-up strategy, or is it already too late for that? What's your opinion on that?
I think a private-public partnership would be a very good way to start with. At least to provide some encouragement to public authorities, and not only encouragement, but to share what we know when it comes to BIM. Because I guess that they're not, in Romania at least, from our experience, a lot of people in the public authorities tend to be very reluctant when it comes to new aspects that can be implemented. But after a while, when they understand the processes, when they understand the benefits, then they are much more willing to study it and to deposit all the efforts that is required in order to take things forward.
Thank you very much.
Top down, or exclusively top down, I think it will be extremely hard unless there is not a European obligatory mandate towards this, and then yes, that would be an interesting case. I guess in Romania things would not move unless there is a lot of support as well and help from the private sector and of course industry associations such as BIMtech.
I'm really glad you brought up the public sector part of the question, because as you'll see in the second panel after lunch, we will have a few personalities from the public sector, from central and also local administrations, and hopefully we'll find some answers, and hopefully we'll try to sketch up a path for the future partnership. So thank you very much, Georgiana, for your wonderful presentation.